Can I tell you a phrase I really like in English?
Tell me.
Killing time. I've always found that really interesting. Time, you got to commit an act of homicide against time, right? Because what does that mean? It means people are afraid of time. They're especially afraid of time passing, but they don't know what to do with it, right? So something that is really, it's really the only resource you have that's non-renewable, and it's something that once you waste it, you can't get it back. And I think people have deep anxiety about what to do with time, how to fill it. So you get this business of people distracting themselves just to fill the time. So what would happen if we learned how to live with time as opposed to against?
So it's actually one of my favorite topics because time really became extremely relevant, not in the abstract or loose sense, but when the railroad comes along and you have intersecting tracks where if a train is going past at 8:18 a.m. and another one's going back past at 8:20, if they're off by 30 seconds, they'll hit each other. So you have to have really, really good time. Railroad time becomes the standard. And everybody has to get on to the same system and it has to be precise. And this is how I really feel about time. Even when we're on Shabbat and we're off, someone else is not. And we have to learn how to coordinate my time off with your time on and your time on with my time off. And this is like the idea, like why Jewish cemeteries are not open on Shabbat. Why is there no morning formal Shiva on Shabbat? Why is it that death has to wait till after Shabbat? The reason is because if we don't make the time sacred, we won't have it. We'll end up killing it. But if we also don't acknowledge that for other people time doesn't stand still, well then we'll end up with maladjusted railroad time. So for me, it's a tyranny of time that forces us to always think about what time it is. And then it's the same thing that if we actually know what time it is, we can step back and let it happen on its own. We don't have to worry about it all the time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's a fear of the open-endedness of time. And, the economist John Maynard Keynes said in the 30s that in the future, people will only work 3 hours a day. And he said that because the new technologies were freeing up people's time so much that the kinds of things you had to spend all day doing, just even ordinary things like laundry and whatever it was, were now taken care of by machines. Now, his prediction turned out to be woefully inaccurate precisely because it freaks people out to have that much time. So what did people start doing? They started working longer. They started working much, much longer, and there's a kind of almost bravado that people bring to their work life. I was at the office until X time. You speak to lawyers downtown. I used to teach a group that had beginning lawyers. They talk about being there 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And this was said with a mixture of a little bit of ruefulness, like, oh, I wish I had more time, but part of them was secretly proud about this. They liked the fact that they were in there working, 14, 16 hours a day. What would happen if you were released from all that? I asked them, what if you weren't working all day? What would you do?
I don't know, the thought of retiring and having nothing to do. I met a man just a few days ago who was a former construction business owner, and he retired, but he doesn't have the framework, and he's standing around the lobby of the building hoping he can engage people in conversation. So I encouraged him to go volunteer and so on. He couldn't manage his sense of time anymore, and it was starting to age him. I feel, though, that when we do have time with each other, we also have to make it count. Because time is not something that is best in large doses. Time is something that really does play with us. There is a sense of overlying mortality. It's not about killing time. It's that time is ultimately leads to our end. So making every minute count, making it precious, I think is really what matters. We don't have to think of it as two trains colliding. We could just simply think of it as missing our train and being stuck. I also recall, like in my memory, I recall having unending time. I can get into my car and drive to where I wanted, no matter when I showed up, it didn't matter. Being disconnected from the whole world around me, that hasn't happened in so long. I don't think I could do that anymore. And not only that, I have things in my life I don't want to be disconnected from. I think our objective is to find reasons not to disconnect, because the ability to disconnect also means you don't have a lot of connection. So I think Shabbat does give us the opportunity to value our time, but also value who our time is with, but also be grateful for the fact that we do have to be bound by time.
Well, it's teaching you to be in the moment. This kind of discourse is very popular now. Mindfulness, being in the moment, appreciating what you have. But there is a wisdom to that. Many people spend their time thinking about what is actually not existent, which is the past or the future. What did I regret? What do I regret about what happened? Or what do I fantasize about what will be? And one of the really nice things about Shabbat is that it is this oasis in time where you are is what it is. There isn't anything before and there isn't anything after. One of the sort of beautiful notions that is taught about Shabbat is that when you enter Shabbat, you should act as if all of your work is done. There's this kind of fantasy role playing that takes place.
In box zero.
Right? Exactly. Even though it may be piled up to the ceiling and you've got all this stuff waiting there, your mindset is, I'm now free. There's a liberation that takes place when you've extricated yourself from these tentacles of the world gripping you, and you're saying, my time is now free. I'm in this zone where I just live in the moment. And that ties into what we were talking about at other times about how you converse, and there are other ideas about how you might walk on Shabbat or how you might talk on Shabbat, but the idea of trying to not see time as your enemy, but to flow with it and see it as not necessarily your friend, but just something inevitable.
Well, nothing says timelessness like a beautiful candlelit dinner with some wine, some challah, people you love, and talking late into the night about meaningful and loving things. I think there are nights when you can have a conversation with someone and it feels like it can go on forever, and it's a beautiful place to be, and that's the opportunity Shabbat offers us.
It is a piece of forever. It's literally a piece of eternity.
I love the idea that if you make the break with time, you own whatever space you give yourself.